Last time on, the name of this book is Secret. Cass and Max Ernest had been going through a bunch of crazy, ridiculous things in order to save a boy named Benjamin Blake. Such things included finding a magician who was thought to be dead, but after reading his notebook and going into a evil spa, realized that he may not be as dead as they thought he was. That the magician has a brother who was lost to him by the Golden Lady, and now the Golden Lady has come back with said brother after having a bunch of kidnapping kids and experimenting on them to find the I could do this now. Synthesia, which is the confusion of the senses, where if you see the color blue, you hear a flute, or you hear a flute, but you taste strawberries, or your senses are confused. And they've been kidnapping kids that have this and experimenting on them to find the secret. Now, the secret, as we have found out, is not an easy thing because nobody even knows what the secret has to do with. They just know there's a secret and they want to know it. Now, the Petro is trying to keep the secret hidden, and Luciano and Dr. L and Miss Mavis are trying to find out the secret because they believe it has to do with everlasting life. With that, Cass and Max Ernest have now entered the pyramid into which the Midnight Sun has called a meeting, and to which they believe something horrible and awful is going to happen to Benjamin Blake, who has this synthesia. And because of that, a giant party, as it were to be amassed, and everybody who comes has the white gloves, the unnerving white gloves that there it is, that Dr. L and Miss Mavis wear. Owen, who has been Cassandra's kind of butler, as it were, has let them escape because Dr. L and Miss Mavis has captured them. So let them escape so that they can be free. But instead, they chose to save Benjamin, to which led them back to Miss Mavis's office. And after a slew of puzzles and interactive room pieces, we're able to find a secret door into the pyramid. And that, my dear friends, is where we left off, with the sentence, "On the other side of the door was a vast room, the interior of the pyramid." Dun, dun, dun. So, with that, let us get into chapter 29, The Spinal Tap Through the Nose. The spy hole didn't allow them to see the entire room at once, but by shifting angles, they could piece it together in their heads like a collage. The floor was tilted with a translucent stone the color of a tropical ocean, and it extended further in all directions than you would have thought possible from the outside. The walls, which were covered in gold leaf, stretched up all the way to the pyramid's top, where the open skylight allowed the light from the midnight sun's glowing lantern. A raised altar stood in the middle of the room, and at the top of the altar stood a large iron bowl, similar to a Volkswagen Bug, but smaller than a Volkswagen Bug, but bigger than a witch's cauldron. in which burned a fire with the same iridescent flame as the lantern above. The audience surrounded the altar on all sides, creating a kind of theater in the round. Stirring in their seats, they stared at the fire with a sort of thirst, like like a desert animal stalking in the oasis. Among them sat a handful of people Cass recognized as having been spa guests, all members, it seemed, of this ancient alchemist cult. Although they couldn't see her, Cass and Max Ernest could hear Miss Mavis's icy voice echoing all the way into the passage where they stood. The pyramid had the acoustics of the world-class concert hall. Miss Mavis was not, however, hosting a concert. Far from it. "I know how eager we all are to begin," she was saying, "but I believe we have a couple of birthdays to celebrate this evening." By standing on tiptoe, Cass and Max Ernest discovered that they could catch glimpses of Miss Mavis standing on the altar beside the fire. She was dressed, as always, in gold, but she was wearing now what looked like some kind of Egyptian headdress, and her eyes were lined with black coal. She could have been Cleopatra addressing her subjects. "Roxana, sweetheart, stand, will you, so we can see your lovely face." A young woman, she looked, anyway, not much older than a girl, stood up and smiled shyly at the crowd. "How old are you today?" 97? Still so young. Look at her, everyone. No more than a teenager." They applauded politely, and she blushed prettily, then sat down. "Now, Itmar, darling, where are you?" As Miss Mavis looked out at the audience, "Will you please indulge your old student and stand up?" An old man raised himself up on his cane. He was a ghost pale and almost expressionless, as if human emotion cost him too much effort. But his eyes were alive and watchful, and he wore a sleek black suit, so impeccably tailored it seemed by itself to hold up his skeletal frame. "Today, Itmar turned 489! 489 years old, can you believe it? Our very own Renaissance man. Take a bow, Itmar." The room applauded more vigorously this time. Itmar bowed his head, ever so slightly, then lowered himself back into his seat. "All of you here, all of our brave souls, you are all a testimony to our success. Every year our elixir grows stronger, and our lives grow longer. And yet," Miss Mavis's tone turned somber, "and yet we must face it, the ultimate triumph is eluded us. We call ourselves the masters of the midnight sun, but we still chase the sun. We have not won." Her eyes lit up with a as she proclaimed with a flourish of an arm, "Until now." Back in the passageway, Max Ernest was shaking his head. "It's impossible. It just isn't. I mean, 150 maybe." "You saw her hand," said Cass. "Yeah, but people, it would be in books." "Shh." The audience had fallen quiet. Dr. L was taking his place on the other side of the fire. This was what they'd all been waiting for. "To a baby, there are not but 5 senses, but one," Dr. L announced, in his tone that was part doctor and part priest. "The world is a blur of sight,
Sound, smell, taste, touch, and maybe the senses we don't even know about. As the baby grows, the senses separate from each other and forget how they all were once the same song. As he spoke, Dr. L looked searchingly at the audience, measuring their reactions, making sure he had everyone's full attention. And it was as if he was still a circus performer he'd been as a boy. Yet, the white smock he wore was more appropriate for a ritual sacrifice than a magic trick. We think of this new adult world as a reality, but what if this reality was lost? What if a real world were baby's world? A world where everything and everyone were interconnected. Dr. L paused dramatically, then gestured to the spot behind the fire. There are a few more like this boy here who hold on to that world, the real world, well into adulthood. Max Ernest gasped, and Cass covered her lips with her hand. Dr. L stepped to the side, allowing the fire to illuminate his young patient. Benjamin was all strapped inside a strange and intricate contraption that combined the most sadistic features of a dentist chair with the most lethal elements of an electric chair. His bald head was restrained at an unnatural angle, and his eyes closed, twitching unconsciously. A jumbled maze of glass tubing surrounded him like a long, twisted IV. He appeared to be asleep, but hardly restful. These lucky people experience life like a rainbow of sensation called synthesia, Dr. L continued. Their brains are living treasures, for they hold the key, the secret to have sought so long. As if illustrated, as if to illustrate Dr. L's words, Benjamin trembled violently in his seat. In the passageway, Cass and Max Ernest watched, transfixed. It was easy to imagine Benjamin's brain was seeing incredible things. For centuries, we, the founders of the true science, we have searched for this so-called philosopher's stone by melting metals or mixing chemicals or digging up in the dirt. We have looked everywhere except the one place that we might have found it, in the mind of the philosopher himself. Dr. L held up a stick. It was long and slender and bent at the end. It appeared very old. With this reed, the Egyptians vacuumed internal organs of the dead. We will use it in much the same way, although tonight we will not be making a mummy. Well, not exactly. His audience chuckled leeringly, as if they were describing an amusing but tasty dish. First, we will enter through the sinuses, here. When we travel upwards and extract the cerebrospinal fluid for the patient's ventricular system, here. Dr. L touched the reed to the bridge of Benjamin's nose, then traced a line upward into the back of Benjamin's head. Unconsciously, Max Ernest touched his own head. Dr. L, he remembered, had similar plans for him. In essence, a spinal tap. Through the nose. Dr. L summarized. For this boy, I am afraid the brain death is nearly certain. But a price is worth paying, I think, because what we get in return is nothing less than life itself. Everlasting life. As he said these words, he pulled a small vial out of his pocket and poured its contents into the fire beside him. The fire flared up high, and its flames bright yellow, and suddenly the pyramid was filled with the smell of sulfur. Everlasting life, Dr. L repeated. Cass, whispered Max Ernest. Shh, I'm thinking. But I'm trying to think of a way to save Benjamin. They're gonna suck his brains out any second. I know. Then let me think. Remember how I was just gonna say, that vial. It looks like the one we got from the Symphony of Smells. That's it. What? That's how we save him. Come on, we're going up there. She pointed to the open skylight at the top of the pyramid. Max Ernest. Up there? How? From the outside. Now follow me, Cass said, already starting to retrace their steps. When they got to Miss Moffatt's office, Cass stopped to take the Symphony of Smells out. I thought you said it was too heavy, said Max Ernest. It's for my idea. They were about to exit the office when they heard footsteps coming their way. Putting her finger to her lips, Cass silently closed the office door. Hello? Somebody in there? Daisy's voice called out. They crouched down behind Miss Moffatt's desk, their heart thumping in their ears. If Daisy entered, they would be caught for certain. Miss Moffatt? Doctor? Daisy addressed the office door. I'm just, I had to get some, food for those kids. I'm on my way back now. It won't be but a second. The big woman hesitated. Then, hearing nothing, she continued on her way. Cass and Max Ernest exhaled. I think she was scared she was going to get in trouble, whispered Cass, stifling what would have been a giggle in more relaxed circumstances. A moment later, they stood in front of the moat. The drawbridge had been pulled up. Oh no, said Max Ernest. What are we supposed to do now? This, said Cass, pushing him into the moat. But I can't swim. You'll have to. See, you're standing. I am? The water was only about waist deep, but that didn't prevent Max Ernest from complaining that he was drowning as they waded across. Come on, hurry, said Cass. He's going to be brain dead any second. Then, when they got to the other side, they started scrambling up the pyramid without pausing to dry off. The stone block steps were big and slippery, and sometimes Cass and Max Ernest had to use their hands to pull themselves up. But somehow, they managed to climb the pyramid in less time than it would have taken most of us to climb a staircase at home. So, what's the plan? Asked Max Ernest, panting when they got to the top. Chapter 30. A Message from Above. Boom, boom, boom! Chapter 30. A Message in a Bottle. As you've seen, or heard, depending on how you want to put it, the acoustics inside the pyramid were really especially good. This was one of those places in which you don't want to make any embarrassing sounds. Forget sneezing and coughs, even the smallest, with that breakfast or lunch belch, or the softest, nobody will ever hear me fart, could be heard on the other side of the room. Which brings me, by somewhat unpleasant route, to my point. The interior of the pyramid was not only a space where sound reverberated, it was also a place where smells reverberated. With so many people in a single room, ventilated only at the top, the air became a little, humid. The smell of sulfur, that old stink of Hooverus po adrotus, which is not how you say that, but that's how I say that, was still lingering as Miss Mavis stepped in front of the fire and raised her arms in the air, her long sleeves hanging like golden wings. She seemed to address the sky itself as she cried, "Thrice great Hermes, hear me!" With the entire ensemble affixed their attention on Miss Mavis. Very few people noticed actually a glass vial that dropped out of nowhere as if in response to her words. And only a slightly larger number noticed the smell of violet flare that erupted when the vial landed in the bowl of fire. But nearly everyone noticed the sweet flowery smell that flooded the room. Most eyed their neighbor accusingly, as if someone were wearing a particular odorous perfume. Dr. L., who was bent over Benjamin, preparing the boy's nostrils for operation, raised his head briefly and sniffed. He returned his focus to Benjamin, presumably coming to the same conclusion. Miss Mavis didn't seem to notice the smell at all. The Egyptians called you Thoth. The Greeks called you Hermes. The Romans called you Mercury. She intoned with her arms still raised in supplication. The next vial dropped out of the sky. Several more people saw this one. Caused a pale green sparkling flare when it fell into the fire. It filled the room with light, herbal, faintly medicinal scent that if you had a lot of colds, you might recognize as echinacea. Again, Dr. L raised his head, but this time held it up a little longer than he initially and inhaled thoughtfully. Then he shook his head as if to shake off some dark fantasy and started to probe Benjamin's nose with the reed. He was about to begin the operation. Miss Mavis faltered only briefly before continuing. Hermes Trisgemitus, we call upon you now. Give us your last secret. As the third vial dropped, several people pointed to it, their attention wholly diverted from the altar, when a dark blue-black flame jumped up from the fire. The entire room gasped as the curling black smoke filled the room with the scent of licorice. Everyone sniffed in unison. Then they broke into loud applause, as if all were a part of Dr. L's show, or so they assumed. Dr. L, too, had turned his attention away from the immediate operation, but he wasn't clapping. He looked stunned, almost sick, as if he had heard some terrible news. What's happening? Miss Mavis asked him anxiously. Who's doing this? Up at the top of the pyramid, Max Ernest turned excitedly to Cass. It's working! How about that? Now, do P. He didn't see it. Oh, I don't see it. It was peanut butter, remember? HELP. Heliotrope, euthanasia, licorice, peanut butter. I know it was peanut butter. It's just not here. It's supposed to be in number 20. She showed him the open Symphony of Smells case and pointed to the empty slot. Max Ernest quickly started overturning the vials, reading labels. It has to be here. It has to. Oh, wait. said Cass. She tore into her backpack, reaching down into the very depths, and pulled out a Ziploc bag full of old, smashed-up trail mix. Inside were 5 ancient, shapeless peanut butter chips. Cass showed them to Max. Think these'll work? I don't know. It doesn't really look like enough. How about if you mix them in with one of the others? He looked through the vials and pulled out one. Here, butter flavored. Try it. Me? Cass nodded. Max Ernest pushed the peanut butter chips into the vial, then held it over the skylight. Here goes. Oh no, he said, nervous, as he let it drop a little sooner than he meant to. The vial veered off to the side, and it looked like it would miss the fire altogether. At the last second, it hit the rim of the bowl and fell into the fire. Cass and Max Ernest waited breathlessly until a small yellow flame flared up. Soon, the smell of peanut butter was released, not as strong as the others, but strong enough to waft its way up to them. Our 2 friends sighed in relief. Down below, Dr. L, as if he had been shot. Petro? Fratello mio, Vigiano, Kia, he cried. I am not Italian, by the way. My apologies. Quanto tempo devo aspettar? Where are you? Speak to me! Completely overwrought, he spun around all to get the altar and looked up towards the skylight. Cass and Max Ernest jerked their heads out of view. You think he saw us? Max Ernest, panicking. No. He thinks we're his brother, for sure. As if to underline the point, Dr. L shouted to his brother's name again. Pedro! Pedro! Is it really him? Are you sure? Asked Miss Mavis, almost as distraught as Dr. L. Could he have survived? Dr. L didn't answer. He ran off the altar and out of the room. Everyone, please, stay calm. Everything is fine. We'll be right back, said Miss Mavis to their audience, and then she raced after him. Come on, we gotta get down, now. About to climb down the side of the pyramid. Yeah, but not like that. Cass reached into her backpack again and pulled out a coil of rope. Working quickly and professionally, she wrapped the rope around one of the lantern's steel supports and tied it with 2 half hitches, the way Grandpa Larry had shown her once. Then she dropped the free end of the rope through the skylight and dangled it over the fire, just out of reach of the flames. She tried not to look. Max Ernest stared, frozen. It's the only way we'll get down before they reach us, said Cass, more calmly than she felt. Max Ernest just shook his head. It'll be easy. You just swing a little bit, and then you'll get up when you get to the fire. Then jump when it's out of your way. Max Ernest shook his head again. Okay, you get caught if you want. I'm going by myself. You mean without me? Without answering, Cass lowered herself through the skylight. She knew if she'd hesitated, she'd never do it. Deliberating about whether or not to follow her, Max Ernest looked down the length of the rope. Cass, stop! Look! Cass looked down. At the end of the rope had caught on fire, and, like a fuse, the flames were advancing towards her. At any moment, they would reach her. She'd fall to her fiery death. The strange thing was she didn't panic. Or rather, she did panic, but the part of her that was panicking was like another person, a child screaming next to her. While she figured out what to do, she was a survivalist, she reminded herself. This was what she'd been training for. Cass tried to remember what she had learned in gym about wrapping the rope around her leg as a brace, but she succeeded only in slipping down another foot. So she abandoned the technique and used her instincts. If you'd ever climbed up a rope, you'd know it's a lot harder than climbing down one. But the possibility of being burned alive is a powerful incentive. Just as her feet started to feel the heat, she pulled herself back up to the top and rolled away from the skylight. Wow, we almost added you to the symphony of smells, said Max Ernest, who looked like he'd barely escaped a burn himself. Very funny, said Cass. She was on her back, still breathing hard. Then she laughed. Actually, that really kind of was funny. Mean, but funny. Really? It was? Uh-huh. So then I made a joke? Asked Max Ernest, beginning to smile. How about that? Yeah, it took me almost dying, Cass said, standing up. Seriously, is that what makes something funny? The threat of death? Maybe. But here I think it's more to do with the special understanding that exists when two people have lived through the same experience, an experience that in this case was very dangerous and quite unique. Not enough for one, just right for two, but too much for three. Sometimes sharing a joke is just like sharing a secret. She smiled back at him to show she wasn't mad. By the way, thanks for saving my life. You're welcome, said Max Ernest. Like, it was no big deal, but of course it was. You're welcome, said Max Ernest, like it was no big deal, but of course it was. Cass didn't say thank you very often. I don't really want to go down without you. I didn't really want to go down without you. I thought you would follow me, Cass added. But you should have gone anyway. I mean, since we're collaborators and everything. Sorry. Don't worry about it, said Max Ernest. Like, this wasn't a big deal either, but of course it was. Cass apologized even less than she said thank you. Down below, fire had spread to the pyramid walls. People were screaming and running to the exits. It was pandemonium. Okay, let's get down there, said Cass. Your way. Wait, what if Dr. L is on his way up? They peered over the pyramid. Sure enough, Dr. L was running up the stone steps with Miss Mavis just a few steps behind him. Pedro! Pedro! He kept shouting. There was only one thing to do. Go down the other side. Brum, brum, brum. Chapter 31. Chapter 31. Smoke. Oh. No matter what happens in this big old crazy world, there's always little goals that bring big dreams. Bye, guys!